Hello again. Another verse of the Dhammapada, just to say a few words about. So this one is from verse 277, which says, "All things are changing. Those who realize this are freed from suffering. This is the path." Just to realize that all things change, we'd be freed from suffering. That's quite a claim, isn't it? So that really makes you think about change, the significance of change, the significance of realizing that that's what reality is, change. That's what our lives are, change. And that's what we resist. And consequently, that's what gives us suffering. So just knowing that could free us from suffering. How can that happen? Because, of course, we do accept to a certain extent change, we do. But somehow there's a very strong impetus in us to manipulate life, to try and make it work for us. And that's where the problem comes, isn't it? Where we do resist change. I mean, we love change if it's away from something unpleasant, if it's away from something painful. But when it's away from something pleasant, that's a completely different matter. So change is all there is. And in a way, if we embrace the word change in a certain way, we're going even beyond the word impermanence. Because, when I think of impermanence, it's like something exists and then it dissolves and then it doesn't exist. So it is impermanent and we can see that happening. But actually, nothing is stable for any length of time. So in a way, there's nothing there to start with. Because everything is a process. It's all in process. We are in process. It's quite startling in a way to believe or to know that from the time we're born, cells start dying in us. And of course, many of those cells are replaced. But actually, as we age, less and less of them are replaced. More and more cells die off. And unless we can turn towards that truth, it's actually quite frightening, isn't it? To think that our brain cells are going, that we're not going to be as sharp as we used to be. But if we accept some of that as that happens to everything, absolutely everything. That's why in the Buddhist centre, we don't clear off flowers from our shrine too quickly. In a way, we want to see that they change, that they fade, that they don't last, that the petals start turning brown. And, it's interesting to notice how we don't much like that, do we? We don't want dead flowers around us. And in a way, I would even say that has a lot to do with the fact that we have a deep, really deep need to be alive, want to be alive. We have quite an impetus in ourselves to stay living, to exist. And, when we look at that flower turning brown, it can remind us that we too are fading, almost from the time we're born. And it's easy, I think, while we're young, I think up until probably into our 60s or something, to think that we're kind of going to beat it in some way. Death seems to happen to everyone else, not really to us. So it can be a bit of a shock. I think it is a bit of a shock as you get older to realise that actually you don't look anything like you looked when you were young. The body starts sagging, it starts losing its elasticity. And we need to be able to embrace that fully. So this verse, it's a very strong claim. All things are changing. Those who realise that are freed from suffering. All we have to realise is that there is change, that we are changed, that everything is changing. Because, when we're afraid of death, we haven't really got any evidence that that's going to be a negative thing. Not really. How do we know what happens after death? We don't know. We might have beliefs, but what are the beliefs based on? Are they based on fear? Are they based on hope? Are they based on us not being able really to stay with what we don't know? To stay in that gap of not knowing. But I've got no evidence that actually being dead is any less joyful than being alive. I haven't really got a clue. Of course, it's natural that we are afraid of the actual dying process, especially if we've seen people in pain or resisting death, not wanting to die, not being ready to die. And as I sometimes say, I do think that Buddhism is a really fantastic way of preparing ourselves for death. And actually, even when we're young, we should be prepared. We should be awake enough to see that actually it can happen at any time to anybody. Not everybody lives into old age. People have accidents. People get ill. Even young people can have a heart attack. Sometimes there are things going on in our body that we don't know about. And perhaps we don't know about it until it's too late. So, we don't bring that to mind to frighten ourselves, but to really turn towards the truth, which it makes us much more able to live in the present and to be really joyful and grateful, particularly grateful, I think. Just a quiet gratitude is enough to think, yes, at the moment, I'm, not in pain perhaps, or I'm able to look at wonderful colours. I'm able to walk about, whatever it is that we particularly enjoy. So change, we must be aware of change every day. We must be aware of ourselves changing. And of course, change can be a very positive thing as well, can't it? It's good to know that our mind can change, that we can train our mind and in that way free ourselves from some of our most negative habits, from those habits which don't really serve us. That can happen. People do overcome all kinds of addictions, appalling situations maybe that they live in of their own making. So we wake up to the truth of impermanence, the truth of change. Change, which means we can fulfill our potential towards Buddhahood. So this might sound all very basic, but is it basic? I don't think it is. I think it's actually very deep. So that's something for us to think about today. And I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.